So this is again really quickly just to sort of give you a sense of the sort of the flow here. In New York State, we'd have to incorporate as a 501c3 not-for-profit development company. However, the unique thing is that in this model that I've set up with my lawyers, and that sort of emulates what they've done here in Minnesota and also in New York and a few other places that I'll share with you, is that every investment that we make, and basically every project that we take on, would be subject to investment by the members. So although the 501c3, the whole entity, isn't in the business of making money, it's more of a social benefit corporation in a way. The members of the cooperatives of the investment group do get a return on their investment. They can make money on their investments. Now, it's not meant to be something that would be some runaway stock you're going to make a ton of money on, but it's meant to be a stable investment that you're both doing positive work in your community by pouring your resources into something that is making a difference, but also is also sort of functioning as an investment and not just a charitable donation. So this is how they set it up. In Minnesota, again, you can pause if you want to look at it a little bit longer, but they basically have under their membership structure different types of shares of investment. You don't have to invest in all the projects once you're a member. You basically pick and choose the opportunities that are being flagged for investment, and if there's enough, in terms of your decision-making process to move forward, then you go ahead and trigger and move forward. But you join as a member. They've actually publicly put all their internal docs up, which I've read, which are great, and we've actually used in terms of putting our organization together. So it's a really great model, and it's something I'm looking forward to launching here in Syracuse. And we were lucky enough again to be sort of last December, this group in New York sort of broke ground with the Attorney General and was able to create a New York state-based real estate investment cooperative. Interesting for them, their situation wasn't about neighbors who wanted to invest in like a dilapidated area or something like that. Their story is really more about being pushed out of their community. So this is Brooklyn, this is Queens, this is New York City. So this is citizens and small business owners and stuff like that who came together to buy a building or two or more and do community and economic development with crowd-funded capital, their neighbors' capital, their own capital, to keep from being pushed out because of the extreme downward pressures of the real estate market in New York City. So, two different reasons why to do it, but at the same time, they came to a very similar solution, and that's what my organization, Crystal City Creative Spaces, is all about. Now, what makes it different? What makes it different is that the focus that I would like to have is on creative spaces, is on art spaces. So this could be live-work units for artists where they have an apartment or a home and they could work in the unit as well. Live-near units where they have a residential component, but their workspace maybe is down the street or somewhere else on the block where they could walk to the shop or the co-working facility with other artists. This could be commercial spaces for vending their artwork. This could be performing spaces for performing artists. This could be rehearsal spaces. This could be culinary spaces. This could be, you name it. I include in this, in terms of what is an artist, what is a cultural worker, what is, what would qualify somebody to live in one of these spaces, to work in one of these spaces, or rent one of these spaces, own one of these spaces, is if you're earning most of your revenue or your work income, or wish to would do so through some creative enterprise, then you qualify. So if you're writing code for computers, For video games, if you're a graphic designer, an illustrator, a painter, a ceramist, a fashion designer, a dancer, a playwright, a screenwriter, an actor, you know, musicians, DJs, you name it. Uh, you know, I'm also, obviously, I mentioned earlier, I add the culinary arts to that. I add a lot of different elements of our sort of, you know, our creative industries that would fit within what the attraction and what the core market would be. So this is an organization, again, ironically, I guess, out of Minnesota, ArtSpace Incorporated. My organization, Think, back in 2003, hired them to come and consult. So they did a report on Syracuse, and a whole lot's happened since that report in terms of buying buildings in Syracuse and turning them into art spaces. So they had a lasting impression. But you know how I knew about them is because I was looking for organizations to emulate for Think, and what we wanted to do is get to a place where, you know, we no longer were nomadic, but we could go into becoming developers and owners of our own spaces. So we wanted to own the restaurant or the cafe that we were doing our poetry nights in. We wanted to own, or at least have an opportunity to own, the buildings that we were having our studios in, our workspaces in. And this organization did that. So they've been going since the 70s, and they now own multiple buildings all over. They consult all over. They're, you know, a lot of these are high end. Some of them, some of the ones they started with were very humble, and things that you would see in Syracuse, you know, sort of buildings of this scale. And so they have a model, and they have a way in which they can make it happen. And you know, this is sort of what we want to try to do here in Syracuse, but using the real estate investment cooperative model to develop art spaces. So one of the best examples that I can think of in terms of a space in particular that would be a really great model for mixed-use development, and you know, it's kind of the rubber's meeting the road a little bit here for where I'm at here in Syracuse, is this organization AS220, which is sort of a smaller scale version of ArtSpace Incorporated. So AS220, ArtSpace 220, really launched as a sort of a DIY, an 85 in 1985, $800 one room, you know, volunteer art space, you know, mixed use, very kind of like grassrootsy space. And then eventually they were able to take over their building that they're in, and then they, you know, they got grants and they became a not-for-profit. And they were able to do a very successful mixed use development with residential studio apartments, with a little cafe and restaurant, performing arts theater, art gallery. They did a lot of stuff around working with youth and classes and after school programs. They have all of these sort of like different facilities you can use to develop your craft in these sort of industrial incubators, art gallery, dance, live arts, studios. And so they have multiple buildings. They went from one little room to one building to multiple buildings. So again, this is a 501c3 not-for-profit model, but the end use, this concept of residential above with art space below, artists living above, kind of a beehive of activity, is kind of really where we're looking to go. So this could take a lot of different shapes. You know, this could be a fashion atelier with bolts of fabric and a bank of sewing machines, and you know, people, you know, creating their fashion lines, and with residential above. It could be a brewers association making craft brewery. It could be all kinds of things in the arts industries. So try to not limit yourself as to what we're talking about when we're talking about developing art spaces in Syracuse. And I'll flash to two other little quick examples here, just to kind of bring it home. I have a ton of examples on the website I developed, and you know, I've got more research than I can care to share in these videos on my computer. But this one kind of struck me. You know, here's a connection back to Ithaca, and this was, you know, just a few months ago. And right on the waterfront, there's a development firm. It's actually a national development firm that's pitching a concept for an art house, live work artist housing project, and they're pitching it to the planning board right now. 120 unit. So that's no joke. It's already an eclectic neighborhood. They're looking to develop off of that. They've already done an 80 unit project in Troy, New York. Local people are saying it sounds refreshing. So we know what's going on in Rochester and Buffalo. Obviously, New York City, is doing its thing, but there's an outflow of people trying to find affordable, newer locations, higher, quality of life, lower cost of living, and upstate New York is right in the crosshairs of that. This is another kind of concept that again is part and parcel where you have this very interesting merging of traditional business, which would be a pub or a bar or a wine cellar or something like that, with a full-time art space. So, this again, more and more hybrid. So you can't just have a coffee shop anymore. You can't just have a restaurant anymore. You can't just have a clothing store anymore. You got to bring culture into it, whether the music that you're playing, the layout, the programming, the different concepts, the different themes, the different, movie nights, poetry night, activities, so on and so forth. So, it's not just not for profit. It's not just educational. It's not just about housing and providing fair opportunity and access. It's also about enterprise. It's about ventures. It's about creative problem solving. It's about a new era of small business.